What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Motor Mouse Garage. Now, where we left off last time, I didn't have a front end. We're going to change that today, and I know I've got other things to address, but for right now, this is what I have time to do. And that is to put a front bumper and a winch on this guy. Ended up ordering a front bumper for the 80 series, and I will reveal that now. So I ended up going with a Delta Vehicle Systems front bumper with a full grill guard and also a couple lights for the front as well, some Baja Design Squadron Pros in amber. And I did go with an Apex winch just because I had a lot of recommendations for winches be this, and I've seen a lot of these in action, and I think they work well. And if they don't, then we'll find out, won't we? But anyway, I digress. So first thing I'm going to do is just to start unboxing all this stuff, and then we can get to the point where I can put this winch in. We can get these Baja Designs Squadrons in here, and I will have to do wiring, but for right now I'm just concerned about getting the front bumper on so this thing can look sweet. But let's do that. So let's get all this unboxed and basically get it together. All right, ladies and gents, so here we are. I've got the the bumper in a working position, and I've got the winch out ready to go. This is a Badlands 12K. We're gonna have to figure out where we're gonna mount the control box for the winch. I'm thinking under the hood right now, but I'm kind of like guesstimating where it should be. The winch itself will fit, but not with the control box on top of it. So we need to figure out how we're going to mount the control box somewhere accessible, either underneath the hood, ideally under the bumper, but I don't think it's going to be accessible from anywhere behind the bumper. So let's figure that out, and then I'll come back and kind of explain how I did that and yeah, show you my progress. As it's the next morning and we are back and we have made negative progress. But not really. Not in terms of parts on the bumper and the vehicle, we're looking at negative progress, but I do have some positive progress. So I'm about to mount just the winch right now, and you can see I have this control box for the winch torn apart. Well, that's because I don't have any room underneath the hood to actually put this control box. This control box is way too big. It's huge. It's absolutely ridiculously huge. So what I did was I took the base for the control box. I'll show you guys later. Right now I'm waiting for my 3D printer to be done. But basically I made my own cover for the control box instead of this huge thing. Made out of metal. It's just going to be made out of PLA. So I'm going to try that. I know I kind of messed up on the prototype a little bit, but it takes 12 hours to print. So we're gonna run with this one if we can do it. But essentially, I was up pretty late last night, messing around with Fusion 360. If any of you guys have used it, you already know. Messing around with that, trying to get something that I liked, and I could also still utilize like the switches and the port to plug the controller for the winch in. So that's not going to be done until later today. I started it pretty late last night. I started the print pretty late last night, but it's almost done. So what I can do now is I'm basically going to mount the winch in the spot that it's at right now, and then I'm also going to wire up my turn signals, and I'm also going to install our brackets and lights right here. I do need to figure out, I don't know if the lights are going to be working like today. So essentially I need to create my own wiring harness for it, which is not a problem, I can do, but I also have to install my switch panel if I want them to work. So I have an aux beam 8-gang switch panel that I bought for this. I know it's not a Switch Pros, it's not like an S-Pod or whatever. It's a cheap brand, but to be honest, I have it in my 4Runner, and I actually really like the way the aux beam operates. And the 8-gang is even better than the 6-gang that I have in my 4Runner, in my opinion. So I'm just gonna run that, and if it fails, I can't replace the relays, so maybe I'll look into getting a Switch Pros instead. But as of right now, that's kind of the status of where I'm at. It is kind of late morning right now. It's not super early. But I need to get to work because I would like to get these lights mounted, the winch itself mounted in place, and then my turn signals wired correctly into this bumper. And that's kind of like the point of no return because I have to like cannibalize my old turn signals in order to fit this bumper. So I wouldn't be able to drive this without turn signals. Technically the lights have turn signals, but they act weird because they're missing circuit. Anyway, but all right, let me get to work. Enough talking. Let's mount this winch and all this other stuff, and then I'll show you guys my progress. Okay guys, a little bit of progress throughout the day. So my 3D printed mess, which is pretty much what it is. Let me get a flashlight to show y'all. It's done. It is not perfect by any means. It is not even good by any means, but it just barely works. And that's what we need right now. I don't know what happened to my flashlight. It has disappeared. But I'll try to show you anyway. So I already mounted it up. Unfortunately, I forgot to film this. But this is essentially the box I made. And I wanted to make sure I could still access this switch and this port through this access hole where the little clutch release is for the winch. So looks like I can still flip this switch, which is cool, which that was the intention, and I can also use the wired winch version. Literally this is just like a box that is mounted with like some riv nuts very poorly, and it uses the base winch controller mount for Badlands, like the OEM one, if you will. So basically my thought process behind this was to relocate that switch and the plug for the winch controller in here so I can still access it. I know you guys can't really see very well. You can kind of see it right there. Yeah, so that switch is accessible, and then the winch controller mount is accessible. And I don't think it'll get in the way of this winch clutch, free spool clutch. So, what I can do, if you guys want, I can put the STL file. It needs work. I'm going to make a few adjustments to it, but I can put the STL file on a Google Drive link. And so my only concern really was I didn't want the power wires grounding out to the top of the bumper. So there's a space in the middle where the control box goes that sits basically right here that's exposed, but it's not metal on metal or anything like that. The actual main leads that go from the control box to the winch itself are pretty much covered. There's some gap right here, if you can see. Not too worried about that because it's at least covered by the bumper, so water's not going to fall directly on it. And then this side is all covered up where the little vampire clips actually plug into this control box. So again, this is very shoddy workmanship. Given more time, I could probably think of a better version and do a better version, and I might actually do that. Because I realize this is a problem for a lot of people, and if you're like me and you don't have a bunch of space to mount the huge control box that the Badlands winch comes with, this is basically just a cover for the control box. So I could have mounted it like up here, but honestly I think that's super ugly, and this is a very nice bumper. I don't want to do that. But this is my solution. It's not great. It's just made with PLA Plus, so it's not like super heat resistant, which hopefully this isn't going to generate a ton of heat. And if it does, it gives me an excuse to make another one out of maybe ABS or something a little bit more robust when it comes to heat. So there's a lot of modification I had to do to the original design. But what I can do is I will put that STL file basically in the description, and I'm gonna make some tweaks to it so it fits a little bit better. It's not perfect. You're still gonna have to alter it quite a bit, but at least you'll have a starting point. And it actually, the measurements came out pretty good. So it's close. It's close, and maybe from there you can edit the STL file and kind of see maybe some adjustments that I missed. I'm not a CAD designer, dude. I'm not even like this type of engineer. I'm a different type of engineer, software engineer. But anyway, that was my solution for it, and it worked for my purposes. It's not the prettiest thing, but you're never gonna see it, and you know, it's not the most perfect design ever, but I think it's a good prototype to start. So what I will do is I will leave an STL file, and honestly, I think I'm going to kind of play with this a little bit more and tweak it, and maybe come up with like a final version that I could give you guys. And maybe if I can link up with somebody that does, you know, injection molding, I could potentially get like an actual production run of this stuff going. But that's, I don't know if I want to do that. But like I said, I ain't no engineer, but it's not this type of engineer. Basically, I just use Fusion 360 to kind of like mock it up. But I'm gonna make some adjustments. I'll put this STL file in my description on Google Drive so you can download it, and then you can alter it to fit your needs, because like I said, it's not perfect, guys. It's pretty unperfect, but I think it'll get you there if you really need it. I mean, I'll update if this thing melts to pieces. But yeah, this is a lot of work. So also, I got my lights mounted over here. So I still need to make the wiring harness, which I'm going to do today. And then I should have enough time to wire up the turn signals. I should be good there. So I'll probably leave these disconnected for the time being until I get my battery box installed. I was going to do it today, but I don't know if I'm going to have time because I haven't eaten yet today, and it's already like almost 3 p.m. So yeah, wasted a lot of time on fitting that box. But either way, I got the fairlead mounted in the front. I accidentally smoked a bolt, so I had to use a Toyota bolt. But that's mounted. I've got my license plate bracket there. I'm going to change out that hook, I think, eventually anyway, and probably the fairlead. But so far, I think this thing is just about ready to mount. I just got to figure out, like I said, my wiring for my turn signals and stuff. But save that for later. I need to go eat, and we'll be back a little bit later, and I think we can finish this up and actually get this bumper on tonight, I think. But yeah, that was my contraption that I made. Hopefully, take a look at it. You know, if you're an expert 3D printer, dude, take the design. It's not like anything fantastic. I mean, maybe someone can actually make something of it, unlike myself, but I think it's a good starting point for that controller box. So take a look if you're into 3D printing stuff, or if you're, you know, into that kind of stuff. Just take a look at it. Make it better. Make it better, and I'll buy one from you. But anyway, let me finish up all this wiring, and, well, let me go eat. I'll finish up all the wiring, and then we'll work on mounting the bumper in place, and then we'll be back. All right, guys, so I've got the bumper on and pretty much completed. So I know I left you guys out of that a little bit. Essentially all I did was got the bumper on, I've got the lights mounted, not wired up yet, so we still have to do that. And I've got the winch mounted, but let me tell you, this thing looks absolutely incredible. Let me spin this camera around to show y'all. This thing looks pretty good, and I know the lighting is kind of backlighting this, but this is what we got. So super stoked with how this bumper looks. I know it's kind of a love it or hate it design. Some people might not like it, and I understand that, but go get your own 80 series and put an A or B bumper on it then. But anyway, I really do like the way it looks. I like the way it is designed. We've got our Apex winch in here, 12K, and there we have our in here. We can see this, wrong side. Got my little 3D printed contraption over here, so you can see the switch to turn the remote access on, or sorry, the remote, Bluetooth remote on, winch remote, and then the actual plug right next to it on the, I guess the top right there, looking from your perspective. And then this is just some random license plate flip thing that I got from Amazon. And then we have the winch mounted here, which I do kind of want to get a new link or a new hook, but we'll leave that for later. But yeah, so we're not done. Still work to do, of course. Again, I didn't show it to you because pretty much it was just putting the bumper on and wiring the winch up. So let me show you. Winch wiring is not the greatest, let me tell you, but we've got a lot of this I need to clean up still. So I'm not done with the wiring, which is why I haven't completely finished this yet. Then we have the little isolator switch over here that's just kind of like hanging out. I need to figure out where I'm going to mount that, which I have some wire for this coming. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount it way back here, just kind of out of the way. So this wire is plenty long enough to reach back here, but this wire going from the isolator switch to the battery sucks. Also, these battery terminals suck. So I've got some wire on the way and some new battery terminals. And then we're going to redo basically all this battery wiring. So we're going to do a new ground wire, we're going to do new positive wire with new battery terminals, and we're going to get that looking very good, because in order to get these lights to work, excuse me, lighting, in order to get these lights to work in the front here, I need to install my switch panel, which I haven't done yet, but we're going to do in this video, which is why I kept the bumper stuff kind of short, because actually, in reality, it took me about 2 full days to 3D print that control box, figure out how I was going to mount it, and then actually mount the bumper and the winch and everything. But we have a functional winch for the time being for my upcoming trip. So I don't think the switch panel is going to get installed till after that trip, but for y'all it'll be in the same video. But another thing I did and didn't show you guys because I have to get this done before my trip is I replaced the steering box with a red-headed steering gear steering box. So that's got the 105 series sector shaft rebuild. And I have to send the old box back to them. And the reason why, I think I described this earlier, but essentially we've got this box over here, which I'm slowly working on getting this pitman arm off to send back to Redhead, was just leaking everywhere. You know, the input shaft was leaking. I could have rebuilt it, but under the time constraint, I kind of just wanted to R&R it. And it was really like 4 bolts, and it came right off. Super easy, took me about an hour to replace. But now, more on the trip preparation side of the house. I need to bleed these brakes because let's take a look at this. So I wasn't going to include this in this video, but I'm here and I might as well. But let me take this little guy out here and hopefully not spill brake fluid everywhere. So we'll just do that. Move that in the brake line. But you can see this stuff is dark, man. Like, who knows how old this is. So I bought a tool specifically to do this. And I've seen power bleeders like this used. This is an Aeromotive power bleeder, so you can use this for clutch systems. So this is going to come in handy for my BMW when I start working on that again. And for brake systems as well. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to load this up with some brake fluid, some .3 brake fluid. I'm not in the camp of like, this brake fluid gets replaced so often. I'm not in the camp of like spending a ton of money unless it's like specifically for racing, like a .4 fluid, or you know, even a .5 or something like that. But this gets replaced so often that I just go with like the cheapest brake fluid money can buy, basically. So essentially how this works is, which I'll show you in more detail, but since Toyotas don't have like a screw-on brake cap, you essentially have to loop a chain, which is right here, underneath the master cylinder and pressurize it that way. Once I get it set up, I'll show you, but essentially all I'm going to do is load this up with brake fluid, get it strapped to the master cylinder, and then we can basically pressurize this, and then I can go crack the brake lines loose and drain it. So that way it kind of flushes out all the old stuff and some of the new stuff. And I'm just going to flush it straight through. I'm not really going to worry about, you know, taking the old stuff out of the master cylinder or anything like that. But let me get that set up, and then I'll take you along for the actual bleeding of the brakes. Okay, I've got this thing set up. It's not the greatest because it leaks from the little pressure sensor right here, so I'm gonna have to take that apart and fix that eventually. But for right now, I'm just gonna build up the pressure and then do one wheel at a time, I think. I kind of hear it leaking. So I'd like to build this up to like 10 maybe, do 15. I'm gonna rush over here. I already broke all these bleeder screws loose. So essentially, I'm just gonna attach my little drain system here as quickly as I can. Just gonna attach that guy, and then we're gonna crack this bleeder screw loose again and hope something comes out. Don't think we got anything. So that might be because of the proportioning valve. That's my thoughts. So we might have to rethink how we're gonna do this. Because I think once there's pressure in the system, it doesn't allow any to come out. Well, I could be wrong about that. Not sure. So let's tighten this back up. And at the risk of getting skeeted on by brake fluid, just crack this loose. See if anything comes out. So I did confirm that these all leak, but they might not with brake pressure. I didn't think about that. So they leak with no pressure. Oh, there it is. Got some coming out here. Let me, all right, I gotta set you guys down, but you get the idea. All right, so not impressed with the motive bleeder. Really great concept. I'm not gonna lie, putting the cap on Toyotas kind of sucks, but it works. Most notably, it leaks from right here where the sensor seals into the bottle. So I'm gonna have to take that apart, seal it better, and then hopefully this will work a little bit better, because otherwise you gotta pump this thing every like 10 seconds. It's not great. As far as bleeding the brakes went though, we've got slightly more clear brake fluid, actually quite a bit more clear. I know it looks dingy in there, but I'm pretty sure it's just because the bottle itself is kind of dingy. The only thing, I'm gonna have to replace the rear bleeder screws, because there's no brake fluid coming out of the bleeder screw itself. So it still travels through, because when you unthread the bleeder screw a little bit, the brake fluid actually comes out of the threads instead of the actual bleeder. So that means I need to replace them. They're clogged. Don't have them. Actually, I have to go to AutoZone later, so if they have like power bleeders, I think, or not power bleeders, those little self bleeders, speed bleeders, if they have those for Toyotas, I'll pick up a set and throw it in there and just do it the old fashioned way and pump it with the master cylinder, because it needs a better solution. I prefer my vacuum tool. So basically you hook up shop air to here and it sucks out through the bleeder screw. However, I don't have a compressor that's good enough to run this. So I'm working with my little 2.5 gallon Craftsman air compressor over there. But I think that's gonna do it for brakes. I did get a lot of the nasty fluid out of there, which was my main goal, but it would have been nice if I could have at least gotten the rear brakes bled. I let them bleed a little bit onto the ground, not intentionally, but so I'm hoping that'll work just fine. And if not, then I need bleeders. I need new bleeders. Okay, so I think it's gonna be it. Okay, ladies and gents, we're gonna continue on with this series. So it's been quite a while for me. It's been a week, went on a trip, kind of tested the cruiser a little bit, so it's a little dirty under the hood. But what we're gonna do right now is we're gonna clean up some of this wiring. So these battery terminals are garbage. So I've got new V-gate terminals that I got from Amazon that I used on my 4Runner build that I really liked. So we're gonna replace the terminals. We're also going to replace the battery cables with new wiring, essentially. I'm gonna try to reuse some of the old corrugated tubing and the mounts and everything like that, because I like to keep it as factory as possible. I realize it's not really gonna be super obtainable, but also we need to do something with this control box. I don't really know how I'm gonna do it yet. I think what I'm gonna end up doing is I'm gonna take the bolts out of this plastic cover because they kind of don't do anything really, and I'm gonna put the bolts on the outside and then cut these studs off, perhaps. That way the lid or this bottom cover stays on. And then I'm gonna figure out where I can mount this. I'm gonna extend this line because I've got plenty of wiring. I think I've got a ton of, I think it's 4-gauge wiring, I'm pretty sure. And yeah, so you can see this nut is barely on here, so that's why I wanna switch terminals so I can have more room for accessories. I think eventually I'm gonna do a dual battery, so I'm gonna have a battery over here, so we gotta figure out that mess. And I'm gonna switch the terminals that I'm putting here to the secondary battery in the future when it gets to that point. So, but for now, I really need to change out these terminals, and I really wanna get rid of, clean up these ground wires. I've got more 10-gauge wiring for this, and we need to do that before we install the switch panel to get these lights in the bumper actually functional. And that way I can mount more lighting accessories as I go along. So I'm gonna kind of set you guys up. First I gotta clean up my pallet mess that I made last night, but anyway, I digress. Let me get that cleaned up. Let me get set up for removing. I'm just gonna remove both battery cables, positive and negative, terminals and all, and I'm gonna kind of assess the length and try to match the length and see if we can replace any of the other 10-gauge wires that come here, because I got a bunch of 10-gauge wiring as well that I think would probably be a pretty decent idea to replace at this point. But we'll see. I don't know, because I don't really want to lose a lot of that factory robustness, you know what I mean? I don't want to introduce any problems. But anyway, let's get to work. Let's get started by getting this power wire off. Should probably disconnect the battery before I get too crazy, at least the ground side. That way we don't have stuff freaking out on us. Here's our winch, isolator, which we're gonna extend that. These are for our headlights, ballasts. This is the fusible link. This is the main power wire. That all comes off. So we're gonna remove all of this as one piece, essentially. And then also, we gotta take out the ground over there on that side. Need a 10 mil. Grab a wrench to loosen it, hopefully. Okay, let's get a ratchet. Let's get the trusty ratchet out. Otherwise it's gonna take 8 years. Of course it won't fit. All right, take this out. Also, I noticed these battery cables are really short. So I'm probably going to extend them by a little bit just to give us a little bit more room to play with, and make things a little bit easier when we want to start mounting stuff to this battery. Not to mention, like, what if I have a different size battery in here and it sits farther away, you know? So I think I'm going to take the time to extend the battery cables for sure. And I really need to figure out what I'm going to do with this isolator. I don't know where I'm going to mount it just yet. Excuse me, my head is in the way. But I want to mount it somewhere like super out of the way. I could mount it to like right here, like make my own mounting system. I don't know. We'll figure it out. Figure it out later. I'm getting sidetracked again. Okay. So this is another thing I wish I could get rid of, which I might look into in the future, which is this fusible link garbage. I know a couple companies make like replacement kits to actually fit fusible links that exist nowadays, because I don't think these kind of fusible links exist. But for right now, we're just going to worry about these battery cables, which means I need to disconnect the starter wire down there, which is, I believe, is a 12, and then ground wire on the side of the block, which I believe is a 14. So let me do that, and I'll pull this out, and then we'll kind of plan it out from there. This is what I'm working with. This is the power cable and the ground cable all in one. So they tape them together from the factory. And this is the little connector that goes on the alternator. So I definitely want to save that. And so I notice right off the bat that this cable has like little metal locating tabs on it. I don't think we're going to need those. I understand that they're there for a reason, but I can't exactly reuse these terminal connectors, right? So I think I'm just going to put a flat one on here and kind of leave it up to this plastic thing to locate it, because that slides down in here like this. So let's get this separated. I don't think I'm going to be able to reuse any of this electrical tape, obviously, but I think I could reuse a large majority of this. I definitely want to keep this on here, but the electrical tape just kind of like is disintegrating in my hands, so we're going to have to replace that. But yeah, I think, let's measure this out. Okay, so I've got some replacement battery cables. These is just 4-gauge welding wire, which is pretty damn close, if not a little bit bigger than this size. So this clip that mounts to basically the mounting position is 12 inches back from the beginning, about 12 inches back from the beginning of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to extend this front portion probably another 3 or 4 inches. I'm just going to eyeball it. I'm not going to like, you know, take any like crazy measurements or anything, because it's not really that big of a deal, and it would benefit from it being longer in general. But first thing I'm going to do is get rid of all this crusty electrical tape. Now remember, I actually do have OEM electrical tape that I'm going to use, because why not? I've got it, I paid for it, and I think it's a little bit better than your typical like dollar store electrical tape. I mean, it's lasted 30 years up to this point, right? So we're gonna use that. You can see after many years, it's just kind of falling apart. And I'm gonna try to reuse this split loom. I do have more, but I just think this stuff is like higher quality than the stuff that I have, to be honest. So I kind of want to hold on to it. But I can literally like unwrap this by hand. But I'm not going to sit here and make you watch this. Basically what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to lay out the new cable next to it, measure it up, extend it a little bit, and then I'll probably also extend the negative cable as well. But first we got to get these separated, so let me do that. Okay guys, I was able to save the split loom, and what I'm going to do now is measure out this power cable where it ends in the terminal. So OEM length is right here, and then I'm going to go past OEM length a good, probably We'll do 6 inches, I think. I think that will suffice. So we're gonna go right here. And these are special kind of wire cutters that make clipping thick gauge wire like this a breeze. But so I've got a little bit of extra room on the power cable, and I'm gonna do the same to the ground cable. And we'll sit this over here, and this will be over here. And by the way, I got all of these parts, or I guess I got all of this cable over at Amazon. I will link the wire that I've used in my description because I like this wire. I don't know if it's like the best quality. I mean, it looks okay. And it's been holding up in my Forerunner for quite a while now. So I have a dual battery system on my Forerunner that I basically put together with all of this wire. So I'm a pretty big fan of this brand specifically, and I know it works. So here we are at OEM length, roughly about there, and then I'm going to extend it to out here, so another like 6 inches or so. Do right there. I'm gonna cut it straight. Boom. We have power and ground wires, and this is for later because I always find myself reordering 4-gauge wire for whatever reason, you know, one reason or another. It's always just good to have some on hand. So now what I need to do is I need to take a rough measurement of this 10-gauge wire. So I do have more 10-gauge wire, and I do believe I have terminals that'll fit down to a 10-gauge wire. And we're just going to tie it in just like the OEM setup right here. The only tricky part is going to be this end because it's at like a 90-degree angle. So I think I'm just going to take the terminals I have and bend it 90 degrees, and it should be okay. And if not, I might have to get like a special terminal end, but I think it'll be okay. So let me measure out this 10-gauge wire. So I'm going to have that. I'm going to do it the same way, and I'll probably extend that as well, like an extra 2 inches or so. And then I can show you guys how I'm going to basically clean this up. So I've got terminals that I like to use, and I've got heat shrink that I like to use, and we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it that way. So let me get all that stuff ready to go. So I got my heat shrink and my terminals I'm gonna use all set up more or less. And when it comes to like thick gauge wire like this, you're gonna have to use a knife to essentially strip the rubber sheath or the insulation. And what I do is I'll just measure basically the top of this and kind of just eyeball it. So, okay, looks good, like right there. And then just take a pretty sharp knife, the sharper the better. I kind of just score it all the way around as in straight of a line as I possibly can. Not good with that, but I think that'll work for now. And boom, pops off like that. I've already got my heat shrink and everything on here, so don't forget that if you're doing this. And then this essentially is just gonna go over the top like that. It sits on here, and then we just gotta crimp it, which I need to show you my hydraulic crimpers that I have, and I think they're already set up for this gauge wire because that's what I used it last for. Yeah, here we are. So technically this is a 16 gauge wire clamp because the measurements are not exact or are different than they were on the 4 gauge. So I'm just gonna use a 16 gauge and essentially use that. Make sure this is tightened. So again, I got all these tools on Amazon. If you work with wiring a lot, if you do a lot of your own wiring, I very highly recommend getting this hydraulic crimper because it makes crimping large wires like this extremely easy, and it's pretty much right every time, so that's always good. And I always choose like a size smaller because I really want this crimp to work correctly. Just lining it up, making sure when it crimps down exactly where I want it. There we go. And with the hydraulic one, you can get a lot of force into this crimp, which is awesome. Okay. And then you just release it, and you have a crimped terminal right here. And that sucker is on there. And then basically what I'll do is I'll just pull this heat shrink up right here, and I will take a lighter or a heat gun, preferably a heat gun. But yeah, essentially I'm just going to do that for the rest of my terminals and hope to fit in the 10 gauge wire kind of like this is set up, but we'll see. We'll see if I can pull that off. But yeah, essentially you're just going to do this for all your ends. Kind of keep in mind like what direction they're going to go, but it doesn't really matter since this wire is pretty flexible, so you're able to like move it around quite a bit compared to like, you know, the stock wiring, of course. Also, I wanted to take a note and kind of shout out Wi-Fi. I'm not sponsored. They didn't send me any of this. I've just been using this. Their terminals and their heat shrink, I think is awesome. And you can find it on Amazon. Super easy, very cheap. Granted, I think it's made in China. You know, I understand. Designed in New Jersey. Okay, made in PRC. So I don't know where that is. If you know where that is, you know, I'm a dirty American, so I don't know my world geography too well. But anyway, I digress. Wi-Fi, great great heat shrink, and really good larger size terminals. I haven't used their small stuff, but I would imagine it's good. So yeah, let me do the work for the rest of this stuff. I think I've got this to a good point. So here's the starter side. Here's the ground side. I had to bore that out a little bit so it fits on the bolt on the block. I've got the factory little foam here. I've got the little catch, the little keeper. And then on this side, I was able to splice in this little 10 gauge wire, and then we've got our ground post, or sorry, our positive post right here. So I'm gonna try to put this back in and route things correctly, and hopefully I got the lengths right, but we'll see. Let me go do that. I've got pretty much all the wiring in place. I also extended the wiring for this isolator for my winch. Basically I just used another cable that came with the winch. It was for like a remote mount of the control box, but you saw what we did with that. And I've got everything screwed into the starter down there. I've got the ground cable on. So I think, oh, here are my terminals. So this is kind of where my negative terminal is going to go. So that's already connected. And then my positive terminal, I'll probably end up putting sideways like that. That way I can connect wires from the back of the battery box and the front as well, which I haven't put together yet because I'm trying to figure out where to mount my switch panel. So this is my aux beam switch panel, and I need to mount it somewhere under here. So there's not as much room as I was expecting with the 80 series, and all of your 80 series owners are probably laughing at me right now because I'm saying that, because you know, there's a ton of room over here, but I'm also trying to keep in mind that eventually I'm gonna have to move my all of this stuff back here when I do dual batteries, if I decide to do dual batteries. But this might be one of those like future kody problem situations, which I think I'm gonna do. I've also been thinking like mounting it square on top of this cruise control little box thing, to be honest, because I mean, it doesn't have to be like ultra secure. And I think we can get away with just mounting it flat to this, and it's not gonna interfere with anything. So you can kind of see the profile is right here. Well, this is a bad example. So essentially I would use the flat mount like this, basically, and then mount it to this cruise control plastic. Or I could just skip the mounting box entirely. Sorry for the crazy camera nonsense. And I could just do this essentially and mount it directly to this plastic piece. So it's not, sorry, it's not an exact fit. But no, I don't know yet. It might not work like I want it to work. Plus I kind of have to leave the bottom open, because if I open this, sorry, I'm filming with one hand. But if I open this, you can kind of see that all my wiring pretty much needs to go up through the bottom. So I can't mount it completely flat, and I need to put all my wires in here essentially, because I'd like to wire up my lights and everything else. But yeah, so I don't think this is necessarily going to work like I want it to. It could, but I'm going to play around with this a little bit more, and I'll let you know what I find, like where I can put it that's pretty clean and not in the way of everything. And when I do, I will come back and I'll show you what I came up with, guys. So I found a spot where I'm going to put this angle bracket, and it's going to live, for the most part, right here, roughly. Hold on, I had to get behind this. There we go. Yeah, there we go. So it's going to live right here, and then the box is going to sit right there, and I should be able to access all the wiring and everything, which will be pretty convenient to run the control panel inside the cabin as well. So what I did is I have a riv nut gun, or is it riv nut? Yeah, riv nut. So I drilled these out and I put M5 riv nuts in here. So that way it's a pretty clean install, and if it ends up not working out or moving it, I can always use these to mount other things. So I'm not super worried about it, but that is my plan. And I'm probably gonna have to extend the wiring anyway, because the wiring they give you is like super short. So this is supposed to be like the main power wire, and it's not going to reach the battery. But that's fine, because the terminal ends are wrong for my terminals on my battery, so I was going to have to do that either way. But I don't have any M5 bolts, so I need to go get M5 bolts. I'm going to look around the garage a little bit. I might have one or two, hopefully. I don't know. I don't typically see M5s too often, but if not, I'm going to have to go to Ace and pick it up, which means I'm going to have to finish this battery terminal situation anyway, and then come back and finish it some other time. I would really like to get the switch panel installed today and start on the wiring for my bumper lights, but I'm kind of running out of daylight already, so that sucks. Well, not really, it's almost 4. But I don't think that should cause any hood clearance issues, because if you look over on the other side, right there, you've got a wiper motor that just kind of hangs out there, and my box sits much lower than that, and it's not as like thick with 3 C's. Anyway, let me look for those bolts, and then I'm gonna mount all this up, extend the wiring, and basically I'm gonna show you the control panel, or I guess the relay box, mounted correctly. And then, yeah, then we can go to the inside and figure out mounting the control panel itself, which I have a solution for that from Wits End. Technically, it's not for aux beam, but I think I can make it work. We'll see. I don't want to modify the piece from Wits End, because it's expensive and very nice. And I might get a switch panel or a Switch Pros mount panel one day anyway. But I digress. Let me finish that stuff up, and then I'll be back. Ladies and gents, so we've got pretty much everything mounted and wired up. I'm gonna have to come back and do some work because I ran out of heat shrink for my 4-gauge tubing, but let me show you what I have here. So here, I've got my terminals installed, negative over here, positive over here. This, I really hate this. This is the fusible link, the factory fusible link, so I'm gonna replace this at some point. I need to do a little research. I know there's a kit out there, but I don't know. I don't want to mount any more shit in here, basically.
Here's my main battery cable. This is the new wiring for my winch that runs back here, which the box, I still have no idea how I'm gonna mount it, and I really need to find a spot for that because it bothers the shit out of me. But overall, I kept most of the wiring pretty factory. And then I have the wires for my control box, which I have mounted here. So don't worry, this gets covered up with this. And that's pretty much where it's gonna sit. And then all of my accessories get wired up through here. I haven't done the inside yet. I've just been working on the outside. But I think I'm at the point where I can wire up my existing lights. I just need to find the right lengths to run from the front bumper all the way up to this control box. And I'm really liking this mounting solution, so I hope it works well where it's at. It should, but you know, it might not. Next, I'm gonna tackle, I have to repin or pin in general the connectors for my the lights in the bumper. So if you remember, we've got our Squadron Pros here. Oh, you can't see. Squadron Pros, these are not wired up yet. I just have the connectors zip tied up underneath the bumper, but now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to figure out how much wiring I'm gonna need. So the length I'm gonna need, I know I'm gonna need 4 wires, so it's a 2-wire system. And the great part about the switch panel and why I waited is it's already fused and it is already relayed as well. So I think it can handle up to a 30 amp circuit. So pretty much basically just lighting. It's not gonna handle like a winch or anything. And I think it will, I think I have an idea for how I'm gonna do the compressor when I get to that point, but I'm still waiting on some stuff for that. But I think we're in a good spot. The terminals are looking way better. The vehicle turns on. I've already verified that. I would like to get some covers for these terminals just in case. So I'm gonna look at V-Gate's Amazon store and see if they have covers for these. Just the positive side. I don't really care about the negative side, but the positive side I definitely think needs to be covered, just so I avoid welding on it unintentionally, because I do that all the time. I don't pay attention and then I spark my tool on the positive terminal or negative terminal or whatever. But anyway, yeah, let me get the wiring measured out for those 2 lights and kind of think through how I'm going to wire them up a little bit, because I just want to wire them to one circuit so they both come on at the same time, obviously. So be right back. I'm gonna dream that up and then show you guys what I came up with. Finished my harness for the Squadron Pros. Basically created my own harness. So it's essentially gonna go like 2 lights to 1. So I have like, I wanna say this is probably like 16 gauge wire at the connectors, and then it necks down into a 10 gauge wire that goes all the way through the loom, pretty long. And then these ends are just terminated at the control box. So with the aux beam, essentially you just strip the wire and basically stick it in there and then tighten it down. I'll show you when we get to that point, but this is pretty much it. I need to trim down this black wire, but super happy with how this came out. So basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna route it where it makes sense, and then I'm going to attach it to the aux beam controller essentially. And I think the 20 amp circuits are what I decided on, or one of the 20 amp circuits, because I'm running 2 off of one, and I think they run at like, 6 amps each at max. So therefore I should be plenty safe enough at the 20 amp mark. Yeah, and then we'll be good, so no fires. So let me get that done and then I'll show you guys what I did. I just finished up all the wiring, I finished up all the interior pieces, and we'll go over those really quick. But right now, what I got, so this is where I'm at. I've got my terminals together, which I think I showed you. Excuse the noise, the engine's running. I cleaned up these a little bit. I didn't clean up the winch isolator switch yet. I still have no idea where I'm gonna put that, but I want it over here, but I'll worry about that later. So this is where I mounted the box. So you can see in here, all of my wires are running here where they're supposed to be. I need to take this off and reheat shrink these because I ran out of heat shrink. Now let's take a look at the inside. So cut me some slack. I'm planning ahead here, but I've got my aux beam right here. So the only one that is actually functional is the bumper, which I'll go show you that in a second. This is kind of what I have planned for all the other lights I want to do, and I would like to run my air and lockers when that time comes from here too. I don't know if I'm going to be able to, or if I'm just going to go with dedicated switches for those, but got the interior nice and mounted. This is nice and sturdy. Shout out to Joey from Wits End. Modified it a little bit, but you know, you're probably not watching this anyway. And then what I also got from Wits End, which this just looks like a insert blank or whatever, but realistically what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount this little Ramex thing here. I'm going to get little hex balls basically that will mount to this. I'll show you when that time comes, but I just figured I'd throw this in here. And also, I also threw in a JDM center diff lock switch that I had for a long time. So if you hit this, you can see my diff is locked, and then I'll turn it off and I'm in high range, you know, but it works. But yeah, so got this cleaned up pretty well. Cleaned up relatively nice. Like I said, the wiring under the hood, not the best work ever. I've seen better, but I think it's a good start, and I'm gonna continue to like improve on this as we go. So let me show you guys the lights. It's the final cue. So this is in my garage. These are the Squadron Pros from Baja Designs. And they're mounted low in the bumper right here. As you can see, these things are bright. They are hurting my eyes, but I suppose that's a good thing because you want those pretty bright. All right, let me turn this off. That's gonna do it for today's video, guys. So you saw me put together this bumper and clean up some of the wiring, redo the battery cables, and basically do a bunch of work. And that's stuff I've been wanting to get done for a long time and just haven't really had the time. So I just kind of did it all in one video and all in one shot. Still got a lot more to go. I think up next, I'm not sure what's up next. I'm gonna have to think on that actually. I don't remember. But anyway, thank you for watching this video, guys. Please hit the like button. Leave a comment. I always read your comments. If you think someone might enjoy this video, go ahead and share it with them. And, you know, all my links are in the description. I'll put my links for like eBay, not eBay, sorry, Amazon. So like all the stuff that I use here, not sponsored at all. So this is just stuff that I like and I have used extensively. So I'm gonna put it there. But yeah, everything else, link in my description, and peace out, guys. Have a good one.